there's all these stories about, guys over in Macedonia who are running these fake news sites.
Number 24 is Content Farms in Macedonia.
Бидејќи ако се направи грешка, таа ќе биде кобна. Нема враќање назад.
So Europe need to remain more sexy lady in the world. Ajde, majkata!
Господа ја чува Македонија и низините граѓани.
Yeah, what is the number right now?
Well, it will be the same, like 64.
64? Oh, good.
They had, but ESDSM is trying to put a positive spin on this, saying that now we have reliable 64. Well, before that we had 2, 3, maybe even 4 who were unreliable. They wouldn't vote against the government, but they wouldn't bother coming to parliament or anything.
Okay, well, let's see. Let me rework this real quick here. A slight reshuffle in the government of Macedonia is... there is a slight reshuffle. Okay.
They still haven't voted. It could still blow up entirely.
A slight reshuffle in the government of Macedonia currently going on. Okay. Hang on. Currently going on.
Are you writing your intro?
I am, yes. A government.
While we're recording.
Yes, exactly. So, all right.
We're going live.
As James Lilac says, let's have ourselves a podcast.
Finally.
3, 2, 1. There is a slight reshuffle going on in the government of Macedonia. A government led by Suda before 1991, the League of Communists of Macedonia, together with Dewey. Before 2002, the so-called National Liberation Army, a, quote, army, unquote, led by Ali Ahmeti, who wanted to, quote, liberate, unquote, ethnic Albanians from Macedonia. Before this slight reshuffle, the government had 64 members of parliament. As this reshuffle is currently going on, the government has, hang on a moment, please. 64 members of parliament. Who joined? Who left? Who still might likely leave? What does the founder of Učica in Kosovo have to do with all this? And what's the fallout from the 151st celebration of the birth of Macedonian patriot and hero Goce Delcev? Inquiring minds want to know. We'll discuss all of this and more in this episode of the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. I'm Jason Miko, coming to you from the foot of the snowy and snow-filled Catalina Mountains in Oro Valley, Arizona. Yes.
Wow. I can't believe that this is Cvitin Sulimanov in Skopje, which has barely a smidgen of snow on its mountain.
We just had a couple of winter storms come through, and there's another one coming through this weekend. The snow level last night crashed to about 1,000 meters, so that's 3,000 feet. And I live, where my home is about 900 meters, so what's that, 2,700 feet above sea level. So it's just right at the bottom of the mountains. It just missed us here. I got up early this morning, to go to the gym, and I peeked out the window, and I thought I would see my backyard and snow. No, it rained, got good rain, but it was beautiful. Oh, the mountains are just gorgeous. So actually, funny thing is, I got to the gym, and a number of the cars there had snow because they're coming from further north. Oh, yeah. So
in the desert.
In the desert. It is colder. It has been colder here. This year has started out really cold and really wet, which is good. When you live in the desert, you never complain about precipitation. And, I know what's coming in the summer, 45, 48 degrees Celsius. So I'll take the cold right now.
Yeah. But do you have UFO balloons in your part of the state?
Actually, the UFO balloons are put in the air by the National Weather Service down by the University of Arizona. So,
they're not the actual UFOs.
I don't know. I'm not sure. Yeah, actually, for the record, and all seriousness aside, I do not believe in aliens. Just to get that out there and off my chest. So, but I do believe in progressives, elite progressives that act like aliens. So.
And in the aliens you get in Arizona, which is the difference.
Oh, the illegal aliens, of course. Yes, yeah, that too. That's for reals. Oh goodness.
And Did the cloud of toxic smoke reach your part of the country?
Well, actually, we had, the funny thing is, not funny, it's serious. There was a toxic spill on Interstate 10, which goes, it's the bottom of the country, basically, from Los Angeles back east. And here in Tucson, there was a tractor trailer truck that overturned with, I don't know, some sort of, so the area is still closed off. This was just yesterday.
Seriously?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So
you're going full Atlas Shrugged all across the country. Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah,
there was something in Texas and the air balloons and the stuff that hasn't been fixed for years, like Flint and. Yeah, it's really
it's
coming apart.
It's late empire, is what it is.
Yeah.
It can still be turned around, but I don't think. Well, that's a whole other discussion.
Late Weimar stages of collapse.
Yeah.
Of societal collapse.
Yeah. But anyway, well, let's see. Okay, enough about the weather and toxic spills and Atlas Shrugged. Macedonia, that's what we are, the Macedonian Content Farmers Podcast. Episode 151. Today we're recording this on February 15. Yesterday was, as I like to point out, I'm a hopeless romantic, so I always point out that February 14 is actually Arizona Statehood Day. So, but we're already halfway through, more than halfway through February, and it feels like it just started. So,
yeah, it's starting fast after January.
Yeah, but and the government is jumping. The government of Macedonia is getting a jump on kind of reshuffling itself, and I'm trying to make sense of. So today, today we're recording Wednesday the 15th. The government still actually hasn't had a final vote on this. Who's in, who's out, Svetlin?
Yeah, by now it's pretty clear what's happening. We don't expect any more surprises, except that we'll have to do an extra podcast if something surprising actually happens. So the government was made up of SDSM and DUI and a bunch of smaller partners, and they barely got to 61, which is necessary to form a government. They had like 64 after they brought on one of the three smaller ethnic Albanian parties, the Alternative Party. This was a year ago. So this was the current makeup of the government. But then they couldn't have like a quorum in parliament to hold a session. They could barely pass any legislation because with 64, and you need 61 to make parliament work, somebody's always sick, traveling, doing something. And the opposition decided that they're going to boycott parliament because of the overall totalitarian police state behavior of the government, and they wouldn't provide the quorum. So and on top of this, a bunch of factions appeared both in SDSM and especially in DUI. So in DUI, usually you would not have a faction because, as you said, it's a former guerrilla army, and you get killed if you try to faction too much. But now they have an active, very loud, very vocal, very open faction with at least 2 members of parliament. So they went down from 64 to 62 or possibly less. SDSM, after so a year ago when they removed Zoran Zaev, when Zoran Zaev left after he lost the local elections, he has been okay, in good terms with his party until recently. Now things are beginning to heat up. We began to have reports that he's not satisfied. He wants to see the government collapse and take back the party. He wants his successor, Dimitar Kovacevski, to fail. So there was a lot of talk that even SDSM members of parliament could join in an attempt to bring down the government along with this faction in DUI. So Kovacevski decided to preempt this. And of course, there was the ongoing talk by the US ambassador Aguilar that she wants people in prison. Now we're still not sure whom we're discussing, probably DUI people and somebody in SDSM, possibly from Zaev's faction. So with all of this, Kovacevski decided to kick out this smaller Albanian party, the Alternative Party, which only had like 3 or 4 seats depending on how one of their members of parliament is feeling today. And with this, because they caught SDSM and DUI in a tight spot, when they didn't have 61 votes, they negotiated a huge ransom. They negotiated two very important ministries, healthcare included here, another ministry, I think, a bunch of lower level, very lucrative positions in the government, in the public administration. So now they're being expelled in favor of their former partner, the Alliance of Albanians party, led by Dr. Arben Taravari, who is the mayor of Gostivar. Taravari was very close to VMRO, to the opposition. He was elected mayor with the help of the opposition votes. He gave his word. He swore that he's his main goal in politics is to fight against DUI, to bring down DUI, so that he's a solid opponent of this government. But after a couple of visits by U.S. Ambassador Ageler to Gostivar, he came to Skopje, and he came around. In the meantime, he apparently bought a house in Skopje from a former DUI official for peanuts. And even the peanuts were apparently not paid out, so he was practically given a house. So he brings 8 votes in parliament, and at the same time the government immediately lost the 3 or 4 votes from the Alliance of Albanians. So the smaller Albanian party is out from is back in opposition. A larger opposition Albanian party is joining the government. SDSM is giving away the justice ministry to the Alliance of Albanians, and is giving practically most of what the alternative party had. So they're doing a smaller reshuffle to keep. They're desperately trying to keep the number of ethnic Macedonians in government even to the number of ethnic Albanians. Otherwise, with this, if the alliance would have gotten like a proper number of ministries, but by now we would have a government with more ethnic Albanians than Macedonians, which is ridiculous in a country which is 65% Macedonian and 25% Albanian or something. So they're doing a bit of reshuffling. SDSM is giving one important ministry, taking a lesser ministry from DUI. It's giving away a bunch of government positions, government public institutions to the Alliance of Albanians to accommodate their appetites. So they gain 8 seats. They lose 3 or 4 from the alliance. Immediately, a small Macedonian party, former Interior Minister Pavle Trajanov, who is always with the winning side, tries to be at least. He immediately announced that he is leaving the government because he objected to the growing influence of the Albanians in the government. He added stuff like lack of fight against corruption, other issues. So he's out. So this means 1 vote less for the government. And the DUI faction, which we believe it's between 2 and 4 people, they will probably be kicked out of DUI after or we'll see at least when the vote comes for the government how they position themselves. So 8 votes are coming into the government's account, into the ruling majority, and then Pavle Trajanov leaves, 3 or 4 people from the Alliance of Albanians, and 2 to 4 people from DUI are leaving. So we are more or less at the same, except that it's a larger, more solid Albanian, to the point you can trust Albanians anymore to keep their word when it comes to government reshufflings. So a larger Albanian party is joining and promising to support the government in exchange for less reliable DUI members of parliament.
Interesting. Okay, well, a couple of things that you mentioned there. I was kind of jotting down some notes, and that's a good recap. Thanks. I think our listeners will appreciate that. You mentioned
it will be on the test.
Exactly. You mentioned the alliance that's Arben Taravari. Correct? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the appetite. How many? Basically, it's horse trading. How many positions are they going to get for coming into the government, both at the ministerial and deputy ministerial level?
Yeah. Two important ministries. One vice deputy prime minister seat, and gosh, it's all blurred by now.
Yeah.
I think that's the main stuff, and then they will get like the tax, like the IRS equivalent. They will
Lovely.
get like railways, even the roads utility company, which is very lucrative. Lots of money there. It's mentioned, so yeah, it's a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. Well, remember, boys and girls, as you listen to this, that the goal of growing up to becoming a member of parliament is not to serve the people, but is to see just how much cash you can get, apparently. I'm reminded, when you mentioned appetites, I'm reminded of the apocryphal story. I don't know if it's true or not, but it's too good to check. When J. Paul Getty became the first dollar billionaire in the United States in the 1970s, oil, of course, reporter asked him, "Mr. Getty, how much is enough?" And Mr. Getty responded, "Just $1 more." So, so all of these, the rats that aren't leaving the sinking ship, if I can put it that way, are trying to get as much as they can. I was also thinking, I think it would be useful for the next podcast and future podcasts, as well as to put up perhaps on our social media, etc., put up on our Substack, etc., kind of a scorecard. So how many, so a total number of ministries and deputy ministers there are in the government of Macedonia, plus things like, the Internal Revenue Service and other plum jobs. Depends on how we define those. And then, so make a list of that first, and then let's see, just for fun. I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to read anything into this, but just saying, how many ethnic Macedonians, ethnic Albanians, how many Serbs, Turks, Vlachs, etc. I'm just curious. I'm not trying to make a Huntingtonian argument, as in the late great Samuel Huntington, Clash of Civilizations. But actually, I am trying to make that argument. So it would be interesting just to try and figure that out and see who's got what and what they got for it.
Yeah, it's a total war for public resources, for patronage.
Well, that's too bad. That's no way to run a country. And as I mentioned just before we started recording, saw the latest inflation numbers are 17%. But as you mentioned in our banter before, that's overall. It's doesn't include.
I think it includes like more specialized stuff like food, and that is not like the general inflation.
Yeah.
I think it's like 12 or something. I mean, depending on how back you go, but
yeah.
But yeah, it's tough. It's tough.
Yeah.
It's
No, it
not
is.
good.
It's bad. Yeah, it's still too high here, but I mean, I guess the good news is it's inching down bit by bit, but that's only because the leaders in my country and your country are they didn't do enough early enough to try and tackle it. So it was what was the phrase Jerome Powell used a year and a half ago? Transitory. It ain't transitory. So let's
Nothing more permanent.
No, that's Milton Friedman. There's nothing more permanent than a temporary government program. So so all of this, as we're talking about it, of course, the government reshuffle, etc. They want obviously to eventually be able to have 81 votes so that they can change the constitution of the Republic of Macedonia to include Bulgarians, which is what Bulgaria is demanding in order to lift its temporary stop, veto, whatever you want to call it, on Macedonia advancing to join the European Union. And of course, we just celebrated on February 4 the 151st anniversary of the birth of Macedonian patriot and hero Goce Delcev. I think we recorded before that, I believe. Yes, we did. And we were predicting, what did we call the title of that podcast? Something foretold.
Announced, foretold, yeah.
Yes.
Foretold incident.
Yeah, we thought there would be we thought there might be violence and whatnot. There wasn't. Good. I'm glad. We don't. Violence isn't going to help in a situation like this. But there were issues. Some Bulgarians were stopped at the border, and there was a malfunctioning equipment system at the border crossing that didn't allow them to cross. And so, of course, the Bulgarians now, in typical fashion, are playing the victim here, and so they. The Foreign Ministry of Bulgaria put out a statement basically that said the attitude of the rulers in Macedonia is both humiliating and unacceptable towards the Bulgarian people in the Republic of Bulgaria. This is just hogwash, as we know, playing the victim. They're the aggressors in this, and too many countries in the European Union and the State Department, I think, are siding with them. But back to the Saturday celebration on the 4th, no violence, that's good. I think the Bulgarians had some delegation there that laid flowers, etc. The Macedonians did, etc. But in terms of where we are now with the Bulgarians, of course, the Bulgarians, let's see, do they have an election coming up?
Yeah, like it's at any point over the past.
It's every 6 to 8 months, I think, is is what they do. So they do. It's a temporary government. I think that's important to remember. They do have I think they do have another election. I don't know when it is. Let me look it up here while we're talking. But and the goal actually of many is to try and get the Macedonian government to pass this constitutional amendment by the end of this. But no, by the fall, I believe it is. So. Which right now they're not going to do.
By the end, by November, I think they would say.
Right, so...
The government said November. Because otherwise Albania would advance without us.
Yeah.
In the EU accession talks.
Right, so... and I see that there was an interesting tweet out the other day from about the Dutch... okay, here it is. April 2nd, 2023 is the next election for Bulgaria. So they're
people first.
Yeah, so they're in election mode, or soon to be in election mode. So nothing's going to happen with Bulgaria between now and then. They're still going to continue with their bombastic rhetoric towards Macedonia. I know what I started to say. The Dutch ambassador, whose name I forget, met with Mikoski recently, the leader of Vodno, and basically accused Vodno of holding Macedonia back from its, what's the phrase they're using? European orientation, I think? Is that the new phrase?
I don't remember.
Yeah, I think it's European. European orientation or something like that. Basically saying that anything you do that we don't like is against our European orientation.
That's the same guy who famously told the country that we need to, pinch our nose and swallow this alone.
Oh, the so-called French proposal.
That was, that was the... Like...
Very European compromises that we have to live with all the time. Again, it doesn't win a beauty contest, but it gets you into the Union. So, I think, hold your nose and swallow. Even
SDSM people were like, dude, like, please don't put it like that.
Well,
it was horrible.
Interesting that some were saying that as well. It's condescending. It's elitist. Now, we all know that the various Western ambassadors in Macedonia are all, to one degree or another, condescending and elitist. And it is there. And, as I like to say, with the U.S. Embassy being on top of Kale looking down, these folks, tend to look down at Macedonians, believe that the Macedonians are peasants, and then piss on them from great heights. And the U.S., it's from the height example, it's from the heights of Kale. And all of these ambassadors, my ambassador, the Dutch ambassador, all the ambassadors, their main focus right now is on getting Macedonia to change its constitution to include the Bulgarians. So Bulgaria will lift its veto so that we can move to the next step where either Bulgaria or Greece raises objections on something else. Okay? That is the whole game, and it is a game. And there will be more objections from something. I mean, we still have the the historical commission between the Macedonians and the Bulgarians that meet from time to time, and all of those issues that haven't been solved.
Well, they have now a great issue.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, the Bulgarians, they have a perfect issue, which is minority rights, which is historically always raised when you want something with your neighbor to interfere. And of course, the Zaev-Borisov Treaty from 2017 actually gives Bulgaria the right to intervene when its citizens, not ethnic minority, but its citizens are affected. And obviously, we started having problems with the clubs that were opened and with the openly self-declared Bulgarians in Macedonia.
Right. And just
you were going somewhere.
yeah. No. I was gonna tie it into this note I wrote myself here. This is an article in the Canadian newspaper, The Star. Remember the Macedonian Language Center in Greece that was set up, I think, last year. There was much rejoicing when that opened, because all of these individuals that supported the name change, both in Macedonia and critically the internationals, pointed to that and said, "Oh, look, this is a positive example of something coming out of Prespa." This article in the Star said that the Center for Macedonian Language has been challenged by the public prosecutor in Greece, because on the decision on the basis that, quote, no such language exists in Greece, and that it represents a clear and present danger to the Greek state. So I need to follow up on that and see if they shut it down. They probably will. That also ties in with the supposed benefits of Prespa and the so-called Treaty of Good Neighborly Friendship and whatever it is with Bulgaria. Remember, folks celebrated the flights between Skopje and Athens and Skopje and Sofia, which both lasted for, I think, about 15 minutes.
Was Athens abolished too? I forget. Sofia is abolished.
Sofia's abolished.
I think.
Is Athens still?
Not sure. I'm not sure, but I think it was like once a week. I have to double check. That's
okay. Well.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, so these supposed benefits, which, in the grand scheme of things, you give up your name and your identity for airplane flights between.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I mean, if the liberal elites, the liberal progressive elites in Macedonia and in the international community look at that and say that's a fair trade, I don't think so. So.
The club in Blagoevgrad that was opened, the cultural center, Macedonian center in Blagoevgrad, in Pirin, Macedonia and Bulgaria, that had its windows smashed while the celebration in Skopje was ongoing. And practically, the perpetrators were actually employed in the municipality of Blagoevgrad, and the mayor was asked, they're going to fire them, are going to punish them, but because at the same time there was a scuffle at the border, and he said, okay, if they fire the Macedonian police who attacked our Bulgarian citizens, then I will fire my employees. So practically, this is going to end without any sanction, any penalty. At the same time, the center in Greece, in Lerin, just across Bitola, across the border from Bitola, it faced like a neo-Nazi march from the nationalist groups in Greece. And now it's facing, I think the Macedonian Human Rights Movement International had a statement. They're helping this club fend off legal challenges. They're facing like, I think, a dozen. Anybody can file a charge that they're discriminated, they feel threatened by the existence of this club, and now they're facing both from the prosecutor of Lerin, but also from organizations, parties, individuals, I guess. They're facing charges. They will have to go to court endlessly now to try to stay open.
Interesting. Yeah.
But the main incidents, practically, the main... the reason why the gathering in Skopje was so, there was a lot of tension surrounding it. We were supposed to gather to honor the 151st
Yep.
anniversary of Goce Delcev's birth,
Mm-hmm.
right? In the St. Spas church where he's buried after, he was killed in fighting the Ottomans in Greece, then buried in Sofia for a while, and then Bulgaria gave his body, his mortal remains, to Macedonia shortly after the Second World War, while the region was in a flux and we were all negotiating whether to form one large federation, communist federation, or how we organize the future of the region. And there was a period when Bulgaria recognized Macedonians and gave away Goce Delcev as the Macedonian hero. This is a position that the Bulgarian government then quickly reversed after its then leader Georgi Dimitrov died and was replaced by Todor Zhivkov, who took a more nationalist position. And by this time, Yugoslavia was out of the Soviet bloc and Macedonia with it, so relations were pretty bad. And the gathering was a problem because we had, before this, the gathering of a group of Bulgarian nationalists, a pretty large group, for the anniversary of the assassination of a Serbian occupation police colonel, Velimir Prilic, by a Macedonian patriotic woman, Mara Buneva, who has been completely shunned in Macedonia, her memory, because, we were buddies and our government were under the Serbian influence, under strong Serbian control. So because she killed a Serbian, she was put to the side. And the Bulgarians obviously adopted her because we wouldn't honor her. So this gathering was very tense. There was a lot of shouting that Macedonia is Bulgarian. There were politicians from a member of European Parliament, Jambaski, the leader of the new resurgent Bulgarian nationalist party, Возрождение, the renewal, Kostadin Kostadinov, and all of this was very tense. Shortly after was the beating in Ohrid of a young kid who is a self-declared Bulgarian as of recently, which immediately became a huge issue between the two countries. He was airlifted to Sofia, receiving treatment. He has now been awarded protection in Bulgaria, an apartment, fee. His mother met with Borisov, and then he met with President Radev. So he's doing like a circuit of the main politicians. So he's practically now sort of like a hero there. Because of this beating, these Bulgarian nationalists who were in Skopje before, they said, we're coming again. And Macedonian group said, no, we will fight you. We will prevent you from desecrating Goce Delcev's grave with Bulgarian flags and blah, blah. So it was a pretty tense situation. And the response was the following. The government deployed huge police presence. It was so over the top with TV cameras ready to film this pretty dystopian images of, marching police, dogs on a leash, very professionally done. Like they had this as a PR exercise. It's probably because the interior minister is feeling threatened in the government, so he wanted to make a show of force for himself, not only for the country, with helicopters overhead and everything. But they wouldn't ban the individual nationalist leaders from Bulgaria who made these statements as persona non grata. So they did this, the stupidest possible imaginable solution. They had, our border police feigned that the electricity is out at the border crossing when these guys were early in the morning when they were driving towards Skopje. So they practically blocked, I think Bulgarians say about 200 people who wanted to come to the honoring. And these guys got understandably angry at the border police. They were shouting at the police. At one point, this was not recorded. At one point, a scuffle, a fight broke out. So we arrested two practically activists, and one member of parliament from this nationalist party. So we had them detained briefly, and then charged with assaulting a police officer, and they were now issued bans. They cannot return to the country for a while, and some fee was given to them in the court in Kriva Palanka. But, obviously our police was lying. Obviously it was not. They did not have a power outage. The Bulgarian interior minister was in Skopje to coordinate the police activities, but he also wanted to attend the honoring and to walk side by side with our interior minister as a united delegation, because this is very important for the Bulgarians to show that Macedonia agrees that Goce Delcev is a Macedonian and a Bulgarian hero, and that we are honoring him together, not as two countries, but as one nation. Our interior minister refused this. They had a small group of Bulgarians who live in Skopje, who did not have to cross the border, joined the interior minister. They had a Bulgarian delegation, but with the incident on the border, which obviously Bulgaria claims, and their media say that their people were harassed and eventually attacked by the police. We don't have the footage to say what's what.
That's because there was a power outage.
Yeah, exactly. The previous footage had the Bulgarians pretty agitated at the police. And then our ministers, again from Zaev's camp, which was very active in this issue, one of the ministers, the agriculture minister, is from Kriva Palanka, and he said, my friend Darko, I think was the name of the policeman, look how, well he handled these Bulgarians provocateurs, I don't know, how he, I'm very proud of him. The Interior Ministry announced that they're going to give 10% pay raise to all the police who were involved in the securing the, practically turning this part of Skopje into a police zone, into a military zone for the honoring. So the government was very strong, feeling very strong. But then when they saw the reaction on the Bulgarian side that their people were not allowed across the border, the incident with the members of parliament, the delegation, the Bulgarian interior minister here was joking. He said, next time I will donate you several diesel generators for the border crossing if that's where you are at. But it's also an issue of, listen, we're obstructing flow of people. We are under very strict EU conditions that we are not supposed to obstruct the flow of EU member state citizens. Right? It's not a laughing matter when you're trying to join the EU and you're pulling these types of shenanigans. You can have an individual persona non grata order, but you cannot pretend that there is a power outage when everybody knows you're lying. So the beatings, then immediately afterwards, the Macedonian center was smashed in Blagoevgrad. Our parliament adopted a law that the Bulgarian clubs will have to change their names because they're declared as named after Nazi sympathizers. One of the clubs is going to agree to this, the other will not. So this is going to be an issue. So this was all raised as new issues by the Bulgarians, and they're smarter now. They're not debating history, they're debating minority rights. And they have beatings to show for, they have shots fired at one of the clubs in Ohrid, months ago. The other club in Bitola had the entrance torched. So they have a dossier which they can obviously point to and say, listen, this is happening. So, this is now, we're firmly in veto territory with the Bulgarians with regard to our EU accession talks and in deteriorating relations with them, significantly.
That's a good wrap up there of the events around the 151st anniversary. Thank you. I think, again, all of this comes. You just mentioned that the Bulgarians are playing the minority rights card. Of course, it works both ways. If there are individuals in Macedonia that self-identify as Macedonian citizens but with a Bulgarian consciousness, then the opposite is also true in Bulgaria. There are Bulgarian citizens that identify as Macedonians with a Macedonian consciousness, and the same thing in Greece. course, Greece has solved that problem by not recognizing any ethnic minorities. And the European Union sits by and says, "Oh yes, of course, you're right." So, ultimately, there's massive amounts of hypocrisy going on here within the European Union, with the State Department, etc. And ultimately, it comes down to the issue of power. Stronger states can force weaker states to do their will. Stronger institutions can force weaker institutions to do their will, etc. I think the question for the Macedonians is, knowing this to be the fact, how do you deal with that? How do you respond to it? How do you come up with creative solutions to do end runs around it? I think you can. I'm not going to sit here and try and come up with those solutions. I have some ideas, and we can talk about those perhaps in another podcast. But I do think, and I was thinking about this last night, interestingly enough, because I'm actually going up. They're doing the Arizona State University in Tempe, which is right outside of Phoenix, Arizona. They do the Mary Chonkoff lecture every year. Mary Chonkoff was a Macedonian librarian at Arizona State University for many years. And when she passed away, I think in the 90s, she left a small endowment to do a lecture each year. Generally, not necessarily about Macedonia, but maybe the Balkans, etc. And tonight, they're holding this lecture with Milcho Manchevski. So I'm going up to that.
Really?
Yeah. And about 2010, so 13 years ago. Wow. I gave the lecture with our documentary film, A Name is a Name. So it'll be interesting. But I was thinking about this in the context. What was I thinking? Now I just lost my train of thought. I know. So all of these issues that we have been talking about here since the Zaev, Kovacevski, Ahmeti government came to power in 2017. During this time, in the past 6 years now, really, the level of interest in and love for Macedonia and all things Macedonian by the Macedonians has really increased, I think. I mean, that's the paradoxical effect of what Greece and Bulgaria supported by their friends, the progressives in the Macedonian government and the progressive elites in the State Department, the European Union. That's interesting. And I think we have friends on Twitters and et cetera that have pointed this out, and it's true. The level of interest in Macedonian history and culture and language and everything that is Macedonian has really increased, which is good, I think. Now, that doesn't solve any of these issues of supposed or of actual vetoes by Greece and or Bulgaria. But this is, there's smart people in Macedonia. People have got to get together and figure this out, how to do end runs around this. And I think it can be done.
As you said, we have no power here to raise the issues in the EU or elsewhere. And as we discussed before, this is I think a perfect distillation what we have with the case of this guy Christian Pendikov, who was beaten up in Ohrid. We've discussed this before here. We have the guy. This guy, he was he had an interview yesterday in Bulgaria for a Bulgarian outlet. He's saying, "I'm a Bulgarian. This needs to be resolved with me being allowed to come back to North Macedonia," he says, and live there as Bulgarian without being harassed or anything. And then there is we're going back. There is the footage goes on of him 5 years ago at the time of the Colored Revolution. He was an activist of VMRO in the youth group in Ohrid, young kid, maybe underaged. And he's loud and shouting, "We will not let the Albanians take our country. We will not give away our name. This is Macedonia." Patriotic Macedonian kid. And, this is a viable, even career path here. You're like a sports fan, join a group which has a patriotic name or something, and then you work with the local businessman, you're either in the club or in the restaurant he owns, and after a while you become either muscle or a nationalist politician, depending on your background. He was obviously a kid who was looking for a calling, looking for a cause. He found, which could be inner, his own, for his own self, or as I said, as a career path in the Balkans, which is a viable career path. This was, under Gruevski, this was an option. You could be a proud young Macedonian and could actually expect that this will turn to your benefit, both financially and professionally or whatever. But now we have, from the government, we are suppressing the Macedonian identity, we are negotiating the history, we are putting in prison people like Pendikov who were protesting. I mean, he might have very easily been part of the protesters who stormed the parliament, and he could have been in prison as a Macedonian hero now. It could have been he was actually attending those very same protests in Ohrid, and I assume he went to Skopje for the protests as well. But through the media, through the, intelligentsia, through the NGOs, we made it completely not unfashionable and shameful even to promote Macedonian history, Macedonian identity. It was said if you are talking about the Macedonian nation, you're just covering up for the criminals in the government, for Gruevski, blah, blah, blah. And the kid was left without this avenue. And he found another. There was a club who opened in Bulgarian club in Ohrid. He knew probably somebody, got invited. It's the similar career path. You can still be like either a muscle for a local businessman now with Bulgarian affiliations, for a club or for a cultural center or something. The police said that he was running drugs as well. This is part of this career path which I'm describing, but I strongly distrust our police that it will give you the actual facts especially on people who are identified as political opponents, whether through VMRO or whether through Bulgarian activism. But one potential draw for him was closed, one potential cause was dispersed, and now he found another one. And now the left is dunking. Oh, look at the VMRO people. They are, this guy was a big VMRO guy. He was going to protect Macedonia. Now he is a Bulgarian. I said, yes, okay. Do you not see your how you contributed to this happening? Do you not see your fault in this development? And now there is even talk about this idea that practically the government that's being made here, it's not a government for the next year, which we have until the next general elections in 2024, but it's actually a permanent coalition of SDSM, DUI, and the Alliance of Albanians. So being, forged in the basements of the U.S. Embassy on Mount Kala, that in the next election, in 2024, these three parties are going to run together, and they will try to practically beat VMRO, which is obviously much stronger than SDSM now in the polls, and that we will practically have a permanent Albanian-dominated government in Macedonia. So this would be like a coalition of the Albanian parties and the one, let's still call it the Macedonian party, SDSM, made up of the people who care the least about Macedonian national identity and history and heritage. So, we could actually have like a very serious assault and blow to the Macedonian cause, turned into an institutional permanent feature of this country, that this would be made. They probably won't get to a 2/3 majority, but with a lot of arrests and bribes and blackmails and the support from the U.S. Embassy, they could get to win elections, and this would mean, a permanent end to the possibility of having a Macedonian party defending Macedonian national interests in government. I mean, as you say, there is potential. It can be turned around, but it can also continue along this path, and people will continue to discover somebody has some Vlach ancestry. It's also, there are a lot of Vlach-owned companies who you can, turn to. Some have Bulgarian, Serbian ancestry, they're going to discover it. If, the Macedonian cause continues to be criminalized, persecuted here in Macedonia, not to mention the other countries. I mean, it's one thing to have Macedonian clubs persecuted in Greece, for example, but we're actually actively doing this in Macedonia now.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
under this government.
Yeah. Well, again, it's up to the Macedonians to decide, how they want to. Macedonians have it within their own power to change things, and it may look like everything's stacked against you, and yet there are examples in history, and examples in Macedonian history, I think, when the tide has been turned back in favor of the Macedonians. So, maybe that's a good place to start. Yeah. Let's end on a high note there. We'll come
after I dragged the podcast into the basement and beat it up with the club.
All things are possible, but not all things are probable. So, all of these things we've just talked about are possible, but when you start assigning probabilities, then that's a different issue. But all right, well, we'll pick it up again in another week, 10 days, whatever, as we try and get back into a more regular schedule of these podcasts, and we'll see what the government, and maybe we'll come back sooner, depending on what we started off with, talking about the government reshuffle, and if the Dewey faction leaves, then things could change dramatically and rapidly, and we could be facing early elections.
We might have to make an emergency podcast. Actually, Mickovski was announcing a major development coming.
Okay.
Some people thought it might be the government vote. Some people expect actually this could easily be, today is the 15th? Yeah. Tomorrow we are waiting for a decision of the European Court in Strasbourg, Court of Human Rights. After basically they're going to render a verdict on the amnesties that Ivanov gave to the about 50 people.
Right.
Yeah. So this could be a major upset. It will deserve an entire podcast if it is a positive decision, if the amnesties are upheld, and how the government will react. There is no telling at this moment, but it could be a major. So we could have emergency podcasts on two grounds: both the government maybe not getting to 61 or 64, or the whole really litigating the whole colored revolution wiretapping situation.
All right, I like that. Let's leave. We'll end this on a cliffhanger then. We got to get this. We got to get this one out today. So.
Yeah. Hold the press.
All right. Good. Yes. Hold the press. Yeah. It's such an antiquated. What an adorable idea. The press. There is no more paper printed. So. Good.
Dude, I'm in my mid-40s, and my entire industry in which I worked for so long has disappeared, and it's considered like a boomer thing to have worked on.
In actual print, yes.
Yeah. Oh. Dude.
Okay, that's a good wrap. We may talk soon. We may talk in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Great.
Sure.
Take care, buddy.
Take care. Bye.